Yeah. Does anyone have any CDL topics?
Okay, let's get the show on the road. Um, yes and no. The news is I'm not wearing I think I said it last time, I'm not wearing the society library hat anymore. That means I'm mostly thinking about what's the ways for me to earn a living. Uh, might be open for contracts if needed, if available, if you have surplus, but I know you're all also looking for contracts. uh, Thinking hard about shortest path to having something interesting to show in terms of frames display. Thinking a lot about frames as a way of displaying information and the different types of frames we have. I remain convinced of what I said last time, that I think it's important that frames have subframes. I've been looking a lot at a kind of data meta model called LinkML for linked data. That is a very nice ecosystem actually of data, and I may reuse a lot of that machinery as a way to implement frame frame definition. So it's linkml.io. Let me put that in. But what is cool about it is it has where's the chat? Yeah. There's also you can define mappings between schemas. So that's interesting. The other news that are interesting, and maybe I should let Jack talk about it, but Jack's been talking to with people who are developing a kind of master Fediverse-based conversation medium that also has a pretty flexible Elixir meta modeling thing, but the meta model is still in code as opposed to purely dynamic. So a bit less keen on that, but it's still possible. It's still something that would be used. And the other people we found who had a very interesting, one thing that is interesting about their meta model is they're very much embracing multiple facets for frames or for schemas. I mean, these are all schema models. The fact that I'm thinking of using them for frames is relevant to CDL, but this is me looking at schema models and what's in the schema. And the other thing I've looked at is something called AnyType. I don't know if you folks are familiar with AnyType. It's one of the tools for thought. It's a bit like Tana. Tana became paid. AnyType is kind of open source. That is source available, but it has sync. The sync engine is the backend. The sync backend is MIT license. The front end is source available. They have their own license, free to use for non-commercial, so we can host our own. But again, a very interesting dynamic meta modeling tool. So this is, as a tool for thought, it's one of the best I've seen by far. And I should let Jack talking more about this, about his own. He's putting something on LinkedIn. So maybe I should. Over for me for now, unless we want to dig deeper into the use of schemas.
The post on LinkedIn, Gary Marcus took my OGM post. I'm sorry, Ken Homer took my OGM post and basically spliced it into LinkedIn, but he took a quote from Gary Marcus that that said the LLM industry was going to collapse, and then it said hat tip to Jack Park. And I thought, wait a minute, nobody ever heard me say that the industry is going to collapse. So I wrote a post that said, I need to respond, I didn't say that, blah, blah, blah. And then he pinged me and said, did I screw up? And I said, well, hat tip to me for that quote ties me to that quote in ambiguous ways. And I need to defend against the ambiguity. So he modified the post. So then I modified my post so that it wasn't a rebuttal of that claim, but rather just a set of comments on the fact that organisms, humans are complex adaptive anticipatory systems, and LLMs are not. It's that simple. And so if for anybody to say that AGI is going to mimic human cognition is, it's off base and it's misguided. But it's misguided because there's a shitload of money in behind it. You get more DARPA funding by making loud claims, like that. And what I said is, look, some of the rag people seem to understand that. And those rag people are admitting that they're only using the LLM as a chatbot and not for its domain knowledge. And that's when they have said the right thing. And if you just want an LLM for a chatbot, you can use an SLM and run it on a PC. Because you get more than enough linguistic horsepower out of an SLM than you need to interface and prompt it so that it's smart enough to spot questions and then send that into a RAG platform. And now in the RAG platform, you have a platform that can learn from its mistakes. And that you can't do with LLMs. And so that's all I was really saying. But I do acknowledge that LLMs on whole have been doing some pretty marvelous things for society. But I ask, at what cost? I mean, the flooding in Texas and the fires all over the country and the drought in on the East Coast and so on and so forth. Something about Mother Nature is screaming, I've warned you, get your act together. And we're not listening. We don't hear it. Now, I know that climate change has been known as a left-wing conspiracy. I don't buy that. I don't buy that. It's already costing everybody through insurance premiums an enormous amount. For example, in California, State Farm just said, fuck it, we're not insuring homes in California anymore. Full stop. You can see where this is going. And what about flood insurance in Houston?
Yeah, I don't imagine you need to convince anyone here of all that.
No, but it's the point is the link between this. Okay, LLM energy consumption. Is it like some people I know believe LLMs are part of the solution that they'll help us find new solutions for climate change. I'm color me skeptical. Could be wrong, but color me skeptical. Of course, the energy consumption is problematic. Can one offset the other? Maybe, in theory. In practice, I doubt it. Is that the main point? I mean, the main point is LLMs are touted to do a lot. That bubble is bursting a bit, but I don't know how much. It's bursting a bit in business, but the question is how many people, what's the impact of LLMs on the social conversation? That's something that interests me way more than the climate change one. How is it changing how people trust news, how people trust one another, how people trust people with different beliefs, how people trust evidence chains? And that's really what's interesting to me the most right now is how to represent evidence chains. But I actually overheard a lot of fascinating conversations of deep state people here as I was taking the bus. Yeah, I was a bit in shock. Uh, this is something I expect from the US bubble, not here so much, but hey, we have our people who believe in the deep state conspiracy. How much will they be swayed by evidence chains? I have no clue. That's something that interests me a lot. But on the other hand, being able to represent the evidence chain, I believe this because this was the criteria, and this is how I believe this evidence is more valid than this one, and so on. Having the meta conversation, that representing that for me is primordial. The UX of evidence is primordial because we have a human collective intelligence problem right now that people live in different realities. Now, on top of that, what Jack just said, are LLMs part of the problem? Absolutely. Could they be part of the solution? Maybe. What is clear is if we want AGI to be used helpful as AGI, we'll need neurosymbolic. That's Marcus's point. Marcus's LLM alone won't do it. Sure. How much is AGI helping us as humans solve our human problems? Is a totally distinct and interesting question. Because some people believe that AGI will solve all our problems by giving us access to more technology. Again, maybe.
Consider the problem of reasoning by analogy. For example, the Tesla that just drove head on into an overturned truck. What does an overturned truck look like to its training set? It doesn't have one. It didn't have one. So is there something analogous to an overturned truck that would have set it off? It didn't have the ability to think analogically to say, is there something, am I missing something when I'm seeing these objects in front of me? It simply drove head on into the truck.
You're speaking, Joel, but we don't hear you.
Oh no. Hello.
There
Yeah.
you
Oh my God. All right. Sorry.
Now we hear you.
You think that there would be just like some training data that's like, oh, the road is not visible. Something is like obstructing the visibility of the road, and then that like causes you to stop.
We don't have to know
But-
what it is. We just don't want to drive into it because it's not the road.
When
it
in doubt,
also
don't. Yes.
depends. Are you talking about the one where the guy was watching a movie and it went underneath the truck slightly?
Yeah, the Tesla, it saw light under the truck, so it just kept going.
Well, I mean, I think they were saying they think that it confused the truck with the sky. So it wasn't that there was something there, it's that there was nothing there. But
Mm.
I don't know if that was just an assumption somewhere. I'd be surprised if
When I learned diving, the instructor at some point said, "Oh yeah, there's sharks here, but don't worry. Sharks are basically just about smart enough to recognize a fish from a rock. When it sees something gesticulating in a wetsuit, blowing bubbles, it's clearly not a fish. It's clearly not a rock. It doesn't know what to do. It's not attacking you. Sharks attack humans who swim at the surface because those look vaguely like seals from below.
Look like seals, yes.
But yeah, the shark doesn't have the category for divers. I found that absolutely fascinating. There's the lack of the truck as sky is an interesting one. But recognizing that something is outside the known categories is clearly evolved cognitive capacity.
Yeah. Yeah, and being able to then defer to the human if it's in an unknown state. Yeah, and speaking of evidence chains, I don't know if we want, I had posted an image of, it's not really evidence chains, but it made me think of it, of kind of a way to visualize relative weights based on evidence. I don't know if anyone wants to look at that or if there's other.
I did look at it, and I blew it up to the full size, and I confess I didn't really understand it.
Yeah, and that's that's an understandable, expected.
I mean, I saw colors
Yeah,
and I saw widths, but I didn't really fully grok what the message was.
yeah.
I mean,
So,
I like the image. I love it. It's a wonderful image, but I'd like to figure out how to make it more expressive.
well, there's a limit you can do without some explanation. Although it would be helpful if it was in its interactive state, which is not. So if it was, then you would just start out with this first box over on the left that has a claim. In this case, would fictional city benefit overall from converting its street to pedestrian use only? You would just have that. And then when you went to explore the reasons why, it would expand to this next level. And you could see that this item has a lot of weight on the purple side and then orange side. So the purple is pro and the orange is con. And then you can see that this one would be a lot of weight, but it has no actual truth to it, is
See,
one way to
well,
express
It's
it.
contested. It's contested.
I didn't realize that there was a pro and a con in there. Where's the indication of
There's
that?
no way to know that until you're told.
Oh,
Yeah, well,
it's
basically,
not.
I mean, we just don't have a legend on there yet. And like, how do you even express that or not? So that would be something that you'd be told in the instructions. You know, this is not a perfect full-fledged map. So that, I'm adding context that's not there.
And
So
what is brown?
brown is faded orange.
Like orange overtook the purple on the bottom right, but there's
So
something separate that is like causing it to be like not true, or like there's some not displayed thing that's like, oh, is that what you're
Well,
saying, Bentley? Or
no, so this is an orange claim. So it's a counterclaim to the main one.
but it's
It has
contested.
well, yeah, it's contested here, but over here it is contesting or it is countering the main claim. So this is like the purple team's claim. This is the orange team's claim. It would have a lot of weight if it was true, but it's faded out, showing that it's not true. And it's contested and thus considered not true because there's a single pro, there's an orange claim supporting the orange claim, and there's a purple claim contesting the orange claim. So if they're both of equal weight and of equal truth, then they counter each other out.
so you'd have to have an orange like counter to the purple there in order for it to become like trustworthy again, or something like that, or
Well, that would be one way. I mean, so if you prove this purple one wrong, then it has no weight. So it doesn't affect this one. So it doesn't affect the thing.
This is basically propagation of contestation, which is very useful in numeric form.
Yeah.
What I find interesting is the second orange line, this one.
the middle
It's
one.
it's actually a con to the next orange line. No, I shouldn't say that. It's a pro to the next orange line, and the purple is a con to the next orange line. Am I right? To the faded orange line. The purple is a con to the faded.
Yes. Right. So I think that there's definitely two ways you could show it. You could show the cons to its parent, but in
The
this case,
cons
I
to
think.
the ancestor. You're going pro con to the ancestor all the time,
Oh,
which
yes.
is
I think.
probably clearer.
Yeah, that's my assumption is that most people understand team purple and team orange, and it's less cognition than to think, oh, this is a pro to this con to this pro to this con.
Yep, I think that's accurate.
That's one of the assumptions.
It's accurate. It feels right.
Yeah. And then you got an overall score up here for this one. So eventually the goal is to make a video of this showing to where you have this claim, and as people add claims, you can see the weights kind of growing and shrinking and the numbers changing. and then do multiple videos, or you do one video and you say, okay, give some feedback, give us some other claims, and the next video would be taking people's feedback and putting them in and showing the numbers change. And just keep doing that till people run out of claims. In theory.
One thing I'm slightly confused about visually is like, so you have in the bottom right, you've got the 2 orange and the purple that turn into this like faded orange. Like how do you distinguish between, okay, there's this, like the orange outweighs the purple slightly. So there's this like, thin amount of orange that will continue to supporting or to critiquing like the original thing versus like, oh, there's this thick orange thing, but it's just faded. So it's like, well, it's not true. Or like distinguishing between this is not true, so it's just not going to affect versus, oh, this is true, but weak. And it's going to slightly affect like the end thing. Like the brick at the far left looks like there's a sliver of purple that goes through. That's like, okay, it's like slightly towards the purple side where as opposed to the faded orange that's just like, okay, this is not affecting at all.
Let me attempt to respond. I think if the purple could make the faded line turn color, it could probably be applied to the main argument. I think it's because it's really a con to the conversion traffic argument that you can apply it only as a sub and not as a direct line to the main argument. And that's why it cannot change the color. It's just weakening the argument. It's not a pro of its own.
Yeah, so
it's purely mitigating.
we don't right now. If someone thinks that that same kind of phrasing is a pro purple, like if you make it, if you put enough evidence on the other side, does it rebound? Well, first of all, that probably means that the claim is phrased in an ambiguous way. If you can't do that, but also we'll just have a separate claim. So yeah, to Mark Antoine's point, the claim is always either purple or orange, and it can only be 100% or less. Well, it can be 200% because it's more important than the other claims, but that's a different thing. You can't flip a claim by putting too much evidence from the other side on it. You just make another claim to keep things a little bit clearer. But we could do it either way. But I think
what I think I would like to see, which is missing from my, like when you say child safety is more important than local shop profit, this is a trade-off argument. So it is about saying, here's a pro, here's a con, and this is how we're deciding between those two. We're not balancing them. One has clear priority over the other. So this is a different kind of thing. Like this is a meta statement. It's another layer than just a pro or a con. It's a pro-con deciding combination criterion. It's an aggregation technique, if you will.
yeah, we're in the way that's being represented in this is that it's an importance kind of multiplier. So the overall weight of that set of claims compared to the other ones, it'll have a higher mathematical weight, and that's how the line ends up being thicker. And kind of to Joel's question earlier, like let's say that there were 2 oranges and 1 purple, so a little bit of orange came through here. This line would be mostly this kind of brown or faded out orange, but there'd be a middle of bright orange in there, and then that would continue and add weight up here. So you would still kind of see, oh, it's really important, but it's not very true, but it still can affect the weight, or at least the confidence isn't very high that it's true. So the weight could still, but it still would have an effect all the way up the tree. And unfortunately, the visualization is missing a piece right here, because this line that's coming in actually is what's adding to this weight over here. So there should be an orange kind of graphic that comes over here and says, oh, whatever this score is, I'm adding weight to it over here. And so that's kind of a thing where
Yeah.
these both kind of just drop off that's just a missing piece of the visualization to show the
But is
weight.
that the right way to? Interesting that you see it as a multiplier. Not absurd, certainly. But suppose you had, like, what I would tend to do is say, okay, so we have two criteria, which is we've raised the cost, we've raised the profits, we've raised child safety. So we have three criteria really. And basically we have a priority between these criteria. And then each argument is saying, okay, well, this is, bad for cost, good for profit, bad for safety. And then, but there's a kind of, the criteria are not arguments, they're just how you measure something. Uh, and the arguments are about saying, is it good or bad according to this criterion? And then there's the how do we weigh the criteria? It's not about multiplying the argument, it's multiplying the importance of the criterion, which is a different thing. You see what I'm saying?
No.
So, okay.
Do you want me to just walk through the simple idea of how I'm handling it? Let's separate truth from impact. So let's just assume all things are true. It does cost this much to
Yeah,
build.
yeah, sure.
It
Sure,
does
sure,
do
sure.
this. And now we got to say, okay, what is the relative weights of those two pros and that one con that we want to throw into the math to come out with a resulting
Yeah.
number that encompasses both weights of the items based on their importance and their truthfulness. So in that case, then we have pros and cons that says, oh, I think that child safety is more important than profit. And just arbitrarily, you put in a claim, and if it's a pro on an item, it doubles its weight. And if it's a con, it halves its weight. So if you think it's 3 times as higher, you just put on 3 claims, and you could even just say, here's a claim, and it's really important, and it's really, really important. Just so you're visually showing this is how we're impacting the model, so that you can't just have these kind of like hidden numbers somewhere. Now, later on, we might just say, oh, we think this is 3 times more important than this one, and here's our verbiage of why, and it could have a 3x or something. There's lots of different ways to do it, but this is still kind of a prototype idea. So that was kind of like the simplest way to have that discussion about weights
Okay,
without having a lot of mechanisms in place. It's just like, oh, you put in a claim, it's 2x. And then you could argue over the pros and cons of whether it really is that important. So you can then the pros and cons work on truthfulness on that claim that this thing is more important than the other claim. So then it's recursive. And then use the same math all the way through. So it's kind of elegant in that way, but it is oversimplified. But at least the actions you take have a predictable and transparent result on the system. So then you can have the discussion.
Yeah, what I'm saying is if you have 2 arguments for child safety, like 2 separate arguments on child safety, then you'd have to play that game twice, which feels a bit absurd. This is why I'd factor.
To what? To say that child safety is important?
No, if you say, oh, um, if we do this, it could impact child safety in this way. And then somebody else comes and says, oh, if we do this, this could also impact child safety in this totally different way. So it's a separate argument. So there's 2 arguments about child safety. They have the same common criterion, but they're separate arguments because there's 2 different mechanisms in which the proposal can impact child safety. And then you're saying child safety is really important. Then you have to say it twice because they're independent arguments.
No,
And
no,
this is
no. In general, you would just collapse them underneath a parent.
that's what I'm saying. You may need to be able to. How do you do the collapse, right? People come in with arguments independently, and you kind of need to refactor
No,
to
this
say,
assumes that there will be constant refactoring.
okay,
Yeah,
that's
so
interesting.
and that's I haven't found a more elegant way than just having a trained arbiter come in and say, nope, these are all the same claim.
No,
You know,
this is not the same claim. These are separate
no,
claims
but they
that
fall
hit
under
the
the
same
same
criteria.
category. So the fact that you have
Yes,
5 different things, right?
which is what I call the criterion, right? What I'm saying is you need the notion of category as, or I call it criterion. I think it's clearer as criterion, but you need that notion precisely as a to make sense of importance and how you factor in claims. And then you can say, okay, what are the mechanisms by which child safety may be affected? What are the mechanisms by which cost overruns can happen? What are the mechanisms by which blah, 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 blah. But there can be different mechanisms for each of these categories, criteria.
Well,
And
those
so,
can all be represented and given names and described differently within this simple mathematical model. Whether we name them and whether we call them out is all about training and documentation, but it doesn't affect the math and how the system works. So I'm using the term claim, and then you put them under a parent claim. But yeah, realistically, that's not a claim. That's a criterion or a grouping or a category. But it's still, but mathematically, it all kind of works the same way. And then also there's fewer kind of like concepts that the learner has to understand the math. And if those concepts are helpful, then we can put them in. If they're not, we can leave them out. But it doesn't affect the actual data model or the visualization, unless you want to add, because you could also say, oh, it'd be nice to put in all the biases and put in all the things, but I find that often adds confusion more than helps it. So,
yeah, I see what you're saying.
or I'm biasing towards the simpler explanation for now, and then we'll expand as necessary. So yeah, it's definitely, we may need to throw in this term of criterion and make that explicit in the system. But I think we can play with it without that for now.
Fair enough.
Anyway, so that's where I'm at. I need to fix this visualization and figure out the topic and make the first video, which I guess the first topic, I guess, will probably be, should we convert the US congressional elections to be ranked choice voting? Something like that.
That's a very good quest.
I'm gonna need to find someone who really doesn't think it's true.
There was
I'm actually having
Well,
trouble coming up with counter reasons, except for short-term political needs. Like the Republicans won't like it because they'll lose a lot of fights.
there were a lot of arguments. There was a referendum about choice voting in BC, British Columbia, about 10 years ago, and it narrowly lost. It was a serious defeat because it was one of the most serious attempts to have voice voting in proportional. No, it was proportional. Sorry, in Canada, and no, Ian is trying to
I I
reach
thought
out.
who's the
Go
current
on.
head of Justin Trudeau? Is that the current?
Yeah, he promised and didn't know, but that was before that.
That was in like 2017, I thought. That he decided not to go forward with
No, no,
it.
no, no. But that's not what I'm talking about. He promised to do it at the federal level and then reneged because he basically people were proposing a system that didn't favor the liberals. He had in mind a certain system that would favor him, and then people said, and then there was a commission. The commission said, no, the system we should use is that one, and that one didn't favor him as much. So he finally backed off. That was most disappointing. But before that, what I'm speaking is a provincial level proposal before that. Don't
Oh.
remember the year, but yes. Um, so yeah, it's. But what I'm saying is because there was a substantial referendum around this issue, it would be interesting to look at the arguments on both sides. It lost very narrowly, but you might find material, is what I'm saying.
I would also be pretty interested in like in my app like mapping that out. I did recently make like a voting systems like topic in my app that just like I just went through the ncase.ballot or whatever nk there's like a really nice blog post of someone that just like compared the like positive and negatives of each voting system, and I just like mapped that. um but one thing I was curious about is the like logistical challenges, I guess, that I haven't really found much information on, I guess. But
For ranked
I
choice
would guess that
voting?
that's like what?
For ranked choice voting or for
Well, just for changing the voting system in general. Like, because I guess that is my impression of like, I haven't done a lot of research, but it seems like generally just like Googling voting systems, like people are pretty, it's like pretty straightforward that like the current American voting system is like really bad compared to the other ones. And so my impression is that like logistical challenges are like the main reason we're not just switching, or maybe I guess agreement on which system to go would be another thing, but the current system just seems pretty bad. Yes, or have significant downsides that other systems don't.
There's so little trust between the parties that whichever side proposed it, the other side would land on it no matter what.
I did just find heritage.org has a ranked choice voting as a bad choice article, so that's good.
There you go.
Of course.
Forget I just need to hit heritage.org on most anything.
Yep.
Hopefully I'll find
You
counter.
got your con arguments, yes.
Heritage.org.
Ranked choice voting is a scheme to disconnect elections from issues. So yeah, it was just made up by someone who wanted to screw the Republicans over. That's why it was devised in the first place,
Exactly.
by the social scientists that thought it up. Sure.
Sure.
It's phrased in the most phrased in the most childish way possible. They're not saying it will do this. They're saying it's a scheme intentionally, and that someone intentionally did this to hurt you.
Except they got it in Alaska.
Yep. And that's why we don't have to listen to
Sarah,
Sarah Palin anymore.
you know that my cousin was the governor after she dropped out,
Oh,
Bill Walker. And I talked to his brother on the phone about Sarah, because they were all in her hangar when she was talking and shooting guns and doing things. And he said he had never heard a woman with such an obnoxious voice as hers. And when it echoes inside of an airplane hangar, you can imagine.
Let's say that was unfortunately the least of her flaws.
yeah.
Something like
Significant as it might have been.
she was colorful,
Oh God, yes.
very entertaining.
She was proto-Trump.
The
Something like that.
what's her name? Ellen Pease or something like that. Who made a career out of her. Who started her career out of her. This SNL person. Anyway, not that important and not that relevant. The question of governance is really interesting, and that's a CDL question, right? I'm all for electoral reform. I'm not sure I believe in the value of representation beyond a certain point, because ultimately you want to have substantial conversation. I mean, that's deliberative versus representative democracy. You want to have a substantive conversation on issues with the possibility to delegate with liquid voting if it's an issue you really don't care about. But yeah, I don't believe in representative democracy, to be honest. But there's a
You
whole.
mean you mean that you are more in support of like voting on specific issues than on candidates to represent and like handle the issues? Or-
Yeah,
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 because it's easier to buy candidates. Like basically, candidates are a single point of failure. Uh, the liquid democracy is a form of direct democracy that allows people to delegate uh, their vote on issues they don't care about, someone they trust on that issue, and then things you can propagate your vote up and up and up until the person to who you delegate your vote can delegate their vote and yours to someone else that they know and trust,
But
and
you may lose
basically
trust.
what
Supposing something can break that trust link.
you can break that trust link, you can absolutely revise it, but the point is it allows to designate people who are most trusted on a per issue basis.
Mm.
uh, there's a lot that it doesn't solve in terms of cross issue or interdisciplinary questions, um, but I do like it better than having representatives who are supposed to be deciding all kinds of issues that they know nothing about, right? Because you've reduced the number of humans involved in the decision. Again, collective intelligence, I believe you need more people involved. And delegation breaks that. I mean, of course, they can have a good team, they can be responsive, but that's not guaranteed. Or they can listen to whoever has the deepest pockets. You don't know. And since it's for 4 years and it's harder to rescind, that's another quality of liquid democracy. You can instantly rescind your delegation. The real time aspect is really important. Uh,
There's some evidence that in the US it's possible to buy judges. Judges
Indeed.
can overturn legislation.
And it's even more dire now with the post Chevron era, right? When judges get to overrule experts on
Oh,
anything and
that's
everything.
that one is slow walking. That's a fast walking disaster.
Oh, clearly. There's so many of them right now. the but the question of what I'm saying is right now there are people arguing against democracy in the US, like very explicitly and very loudly. I mean, Thiel is very clearly vocal against it, and that's how G.D. Vance got in. G.D. Vance is totally a Thiel protege, and they share an anti-democracy bias. It's I mean, Jack, I saw you point out in another forum the latest Maddow extract about, oh, you don't, if you vote for me now, you don't need to vote again. Actually, I don't need your vote. I have all the votes I need. We have so many votes.
What he was
For,
saying is, as Rachel Maddow pointed out, is that the GOP has locked up 70 election deniers in the swing states and municipalities that actually have control over the certification process of the vote. So Trump is right, if you believe it. In other words, November, even if Kamala won by a landslide, they won't let her win because they will block the swing states. That's an issue that Jerry seems to think is no big deal. The lawyers will handle it, but I think it'll put us into a constitutional crisis that we have yet to understand. It'll make January 6th look like a playpen day.
so yeah, the role of reason when we are dealing with, I mean, that was Nietzsche's thesis, right? Uh, reason is what you do when you don't have power, and power is basically the power to ignore reasons, to not have to care about, to take decisions without having to care about reasons.
Right.
Pretty much by definition. And the whole reason versus power is part of the dynamic that's still unfolding. And we're trying to make reason more and more persuasive, but might be moot. On the other hand, and the question about voting systems is perfectly relevant in that context, is what's the goal of a voting system, right? The goal of the voting system is, I believe voting is important because it allows more voices, and hence more voices, I think, ensure better decisions. Not always, of course, but overall. But there are conditions to that, and certainly the amount of disinformation we are dealing with can totally short-circuit that. The wisdom of crowds was famous for needing independence. If everybody's consulting an LLM that is one single condensation of knowledge, then, well, you don't get the independence anymore. And you don't get the property of independence of opinion that is necessary for a proper wisdom of crowd mechanism. When is the crowd smarter than the experts? There are cases, there are conditions for that. And individual experts. Groups of experts are better than individual experts. Groups are smarter.
Yeah, it's still all a bit wishy-washy though. Experts even, and groups of experts. They're still kind of like intuitively feeling around things. It's not a rational process. Currently, we don't have a standardized rational decision-making process, except in quite a few specific areas, but we don't have a general rational process.
We have not such a bad decision process for small groups. Small groups can achieve consensus. There's definitely a scaling issue.
Dunbar.
I don't think that that's a rational decision-making process. I think that's a intuitive decision-making process, and people can come to consensus, but that's not, is consensus the goal, or is finding the correct action the goal? Those are two different criteria.
What I'm saying is, in tests, people thinking in groups find better solutions often, like fairly reliably, than any one person in the group had found on their own.
Yes, but you have a box with a whole bunch of cups in it, and you throw 100 balls in it. The balls will fall in the cups, and you can shake it around, and that's really good. But it'd be better to have a robot putting balls in cups and doing it 100% accurately 100% of the time. Why are we improving these heuristics as opposed to working on a way to make a rational decision based on the available evidence?
Because of epistemology, right? What is a rational way in uncertain information is always open to debate. There is not a single, it's almost like a Turing problem, right? There's not a single rational way to solve all the problems. We're still debating facts, we're still debating methods, we're still debating, in the case of social decisions, preferences, which are not rational. We're still debating criteria and even meta criteria, like epistemic process. What is the best way to be sure of this? I don't think there is a perfect answer.
Well, it doesn't have to be a perfect answer. It just has to be a better answer than straight intuition.
No, I agree totally. But what I'm saying is, it can be demonstrated that groups with a shared goal achieve better results. I wouldn't call that intuition. I think that group reasoning is a more accurate process than individual reasoning. It's not just intuition, it's a process.
But
I feel like there's like agreements there, and that it's just a disagreement of like, okay, how much more can we improve group decision making versus like in
Absolutely.
a small group versus, you know, the value of trying to improve the
Well,
larger
Both, I think
scale.
both
but
are
I'm
useful. Yes,
but
but
I'm
we
pointing out that there are tools that we currently use today that push us more towards the rational side of decision making. We have calculators, we have computers, we have climate models, and then we have things that it's like group processes where people sit down and they discuss a thing and they come to a consensus. And those are kind of on the intuitive side. And I'm like, we still have a lot of room to play on the kind of rational mathematical side to give us tools to improve that other process. And it seems like no one wants to work on that.
Oh, no, 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 no. I won't disagree with that statement, and I'm certainly interested in working on that. Though it's true that I'm working more on when I speak about frames, some frames can be compared mathematically. Like some frames, for example, represent causality, and hence Bayesian calculations are absolutely appropriate.
Yeah.
I think other frames are, we don't know how to mathematize them yet, and
Yeah.
they're still relevant. But is there progress to be done on helping the rational mathematical methodological? Yes, it's absolutely true. What I'm saying is not everything will be captured by that, but
Yeah.
can some things be improved by that? Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
This is very much about the uh, Canavan diagram, right?
The what?
Some the Cinefin,
Yeah.
Dave Snowden, Cognitive Edge. He came up with this model of situations. It's very fascinating. It should be easy to find on Google, the basic model.
The complex, complicated, chaotic, simple
That
categories.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I think that is one tool.
No, but what I'm saying is the mathematizable is basically the simple and complicated
Oh,
side of the diagram. And then there's all the other side, which is valid. But can we do better in the right side of the diagram? Of course. Certainly, no argument there. But I'm trying to say not everything falls in the right side.
no. Yep. That's true. It's really a combination between the two. It's just other than, you know, what you're doing, Mark Antoine, with the frames, which I will eventually be using in Reason Tracker, right?
I can
I don't
finish, yes.
find many other examples where people are working on the more mathematical tools to help with decision making.
Well, actually, the people who are doing the most right now on this is the Felix's team, the global brain algorithm. Hi, Yang.
Um, I did not see that
Oh Lord.
as really kind of
Well,
what I was thinking of,
no, I know it's
but I
different,
may
but
be out of touch.
they're looking at the mathematics of Bayesian reasoning. Do you see everybody seeing chat? Ian doesn't have audio, but he's trying to talk to us in chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, if he's not, and if you're not available for audio, you might just share it in the. I don't think there's much value having a huge meeting. Just do it in the
Discord or
yeah, in Discord. And actually, I was gonna ask everyone if y'all would post any links you had and stuff from the thing in the Discord as well. We have a saved chat here, but it'd keep everything in one place.
Fair
Sure.
enough.
So I'd like to throw in a straw person just for the fun of it.
Sure.
Because this is CDL after all.
Yep.
I don't remember names. I'm not good at this, but the CTO of Facebook, Meta, just stepped down. You probably read this. And what he did is he's still a Facebook something or other, so he's connected with them. But he went off and formed a apparently fairly well-funded VC firm to fund climate change research. He made the statement that he is convinced that the way forward is to use technology to solve the climate change problem. And I take sort of the opposite view. I take the view that the climate change problem is a people problem, a human nature, human behavior problem. Think about it this way. If you study the numbers on what are the contributors to the carbon footprint other than what nature puts out on its own, methane coming from swamps and so on and so forth, our addiction to petroleum is pretty high on the list, and it's that addiction. We've built a society that is very comfortable with what we have. Our our pickup trucks and our RVs and our this and our that, and we just do what we do and we're happy, except we're not going to get to be happy forever. And what is the solution? You know, you can't just take petroleum away. That's not going to work. And I don't think that putting up satellites in the sky that will beam down radiation to collectors in the desert is going to solve the problem. I don't know if you know it or not, but there's a huge movement to shut down wind power because they kill migratory birds. And nobody bothers to go to the Wikipedia article on bird kills to find out that power lines kill 10,000 times more than the windmills. And the tall glass buildings in New York City, ditto. The point is that windmills aren't the whole story. But if you start beaming X-rays down from Earth to a collector in various deserts, you're going to nail a bunch of birds. You just know that's going to happen. And so, I mean, I'll give you an example. There's a solar farm. If we have this Highway 15 that goes from where I am out to Las Vegas, and just before you get to the Nevada border on the north side of the freeway, this is an east-west freeway, there is a bunch of very silver mirrors aimed at a set of collection towers that gather the heat. Birds fly through there and they get fried. So we're already frying them with our technological solutions. Birds are going to die. That's just the way it is. I'm much more interested in human behaviors. And I'll confess to you all that it's the reason I asked Marc Antoine to work with me on SenseCraft. Because there is a strong body of literature that shows that people who go into guilds and stay in, don't just say fuck it and drop out, grow. They grow emotionally, they grow physiologically, they grow psychologically, etc. John C. Lee Brown did a 6-minute YouTube, which he opens with, "I would rather hire a high-level World of Warcraft player than an MBA from Harvard." And he goes on to explain why. It's the discipline that the World of Warcraft players gained from their hours and hours and hours in guilds. So while Jane McConigal did make a structured conversation platform that it isn't a pro-con kind of, it was actual questions, answers, pro and con arguments, blah, blah, blah. What I call IBIS platform. She did it first-person shooter, which meant you were on your own. There was nobody coaching you, nobody stimulating you to think through what you're about to put in that game move. So the signal to noise ratio in her games were terrible. And the US Navy bought a license to it, to the IP, and built their own version of it open source called Mowgli. And they too ran into the signal to noise ratio problem. There were a lot of very good high signal answers, but they were far and few between because of all the noise from the people who didn't know how to use the platform, didn't know how to actually do research. So if you bring humans into a guild and in a game environment, if you did this in schools, use your school material, US history, blah, 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 whatever. Just doing that will allow kids to learn how to talk civilly, to think critically, and to do deep research. That's the idea of bringing guilds to an online social network. And I'm going to say that I'm not so sure we have enough time to pull this off. But it's the game plan I have in play, and Marc Antoine is doing a hero's effort helping us get there from here. We still have a long way to go. And it requires the work of Society Library and the work you guys are doing on your platforms, because you are growing the space of recognition that online social platforms can be about matters that matter. So we're all working together on this. I've just chosen a rather dramatic direction to go, which is put everybody in guilds and keep them in groups of order of magnitude 5 or 6 people at a time. A guild of 50 would have to have 10 roles. Now, a role is a promise. This is the point. It's subtle, powerfully psychological. A role is a promise to perform. So you enter the role and you're not up to speed, so there's a role coach that coaches you to get up there, or guild leadership pats you on the bottom and says, "Here, I try this, think about that," whatever. And eventually you get the hang of performing. And if you're a research rabbit and somebody has posed the question, what about carbon dioxide? You quickly learn how to use Google in its glory, not in its noise, and dig up the real stuff on what CO2 is about and how it hangs in the atmosphere and what its sources are and what its sinks are and how to capture it and all of those other things that then arm the game move developers, the other roles, to make a powerful set of game moves. And it's the camaraderie of pulling that off. And of course, there's a leaderboard. Of course, you want your guild to be the best. But Marc Antoine is working on a scoring mechanism that changes the dynamic. We don't want it to be our nation got more gold medals than yours. What we want it to be is our guild worked with you, and we really came up with a hot project. We came up with a hot conversation. He's trying to change it from competition to collaboration. That, I think, is one of the ways forward. Not the only way, but one of the ways forward that we should be working on. I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, getting a competitive mechanism really is a huge goal for me, because if we're talking game, but if we're talking any, we want people to be incentivized to come up with new answers, but we want people to be incentivized to recognize good answers, or to recognize, oh, this was adding to the conversation, this was insightful, this was I didn't see that, and being able to both talk and listen, right? Create and process, and that is the kind of dynamic I'm trying to create. I'm still working on that. It's not obvious. Anywho, we're beyond time. Joel didn't get to speak much. I don't know if you have. No, fine.
I was fine. I was just listening, I guess, and thinking about. Don't know if I had much to say.
Joel, is your project in GitHub?
It is in GitHub. Yeah. If you go to ameliorate.app, there's a link to GitHub in the upper right.
What do you call it? Ameliorate?
Ameliorate.app.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
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 See, this is a part of the space that I hope we share a desire to grow. And that is societal's realization that there is a different kind of social networking, social interaction that can help us solve our problems and not just worry about which restaurant has the best Pepsis.
Right.
Mhm.
Indeed.
All right. Thanks everyone for showing.
Guys, great.
Catch up.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy.
Thanks.